It's player breakdown time here on Locked On Nationals, and today we break down CJ Abrams, and the big question with him, is he the new face of the organization?
You are Locked On Nationals, your daily Washington Nationals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thank you guys for making Locked On Nationals your first listen every single day, as we are free and available wherever you get your podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Clary. You can catch me over on Twitter at RyanClary11, and as well as the show page at LO_Nationals. And while you're at it, make sure to hit subscribe wherever you get your podcast, and over on YouTube, search Locked On Nationals and you will find it then and there. And on today's show, we will be breaking down the season of CJ Abrams as he took a big step up. We can just leave it right there. Later on in the show, I have a big question for the offseason, and this is something that I want to see the Nationals do. I want to see them pursue this. I'll tell you what that is a little bit later on. Also, let's kind of get into some 2024 expectations and really beyond that. What is the ceiling for CJ Abrams? Because in my opinion, to be honest with you, I think CJ Abrams has one of the highest ceilings on this roster right now. I'll get into that a little bit later on and really what we could expect from him in 2024 and beyond. But today's show is brought to you by Gametime. And guys, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed with our friends over at Gametime. And so let's get into the CJ Abrams breakdown, because we all know this season for him was a very good one, to say the least. And we all know what kind of happened. Entering this season, he had a really tough 2022 at the Nationals. Over last year, he had a 603 OPS with us, batted .258, but even then was not doing any damage. He only had 9 extra base hits with the Nationals just last year. He only homered twice in 2022. And over the course of this season, I think one thing kind of stood true. CJ Abrams was still that type of really high prospect. And what I mean by that, CJ Abrams was a top 10 prospect entering 2022. He was a top 10 prospect even dating back to 2020 as well. This was someone who, when we traded for him, his stock was a little bit down. And what I mean by that is he wasn't really that successful up in the major leagues. But here's the reason as to why that is, in my opinion. This guy was always rushed through the major leagues. And if you saw it from last year and even dating back to 2021 when he actually had an ankle injury, CJ Abrams never played baseball above the AA level. And so entering last year, that's when he cracked the opening day lineup for the San Diego Padres because of that Fernando Tatis injury / just really terrible situation they had last year with him. So CJ Abrams prematurely gets put up into the bigs. And at that moment, you're kind of like, okay. I mean, what is this really going to do? This kid's 21 years old. Yes, he's a very talented prospect, but even then, he hasn't played in a full season yet of minor league baseball. Drafted in 2019, went to rookie ball. I believe he did play in low A as well. Then in 2020, you missed the entire season due to the COVID pandemic. And then 2022, or in 2021 rather, you just get up to the AA level, in which he was very successful at. But even then, we all kind of knew, if you follow the prospects for a high schooler, and CJ Abrams is very talented, but this is kind of someone who needed some time to take those next steps and really develop himself and to craft his game, because he was not a finished product. This was not someone like a Gunnar Henderson coming out of high school, and he was no finished product, by the way, either. But even then, you saw a little bit more of a skill set right then and there. What I mean by that, a little more of a developed body, a little bit more of a major league aspiration kind of guy. So entering this year, after struggling last year, the expectations may have not been the highest for CJ Abrams. But over the course of the season, I think one thing stood true. And the one thing that was true about CJ Abrams is that this guy's going to hit. And when he does hit, he's going to cause havoc on the base path. And when he causes havoc on the base path, he's going to determine some outcomes of the game. He's going to switch. He's the guy If you watch NFL Red Zone, you know what I mean. He is kind of the witching hour guy. He will turn losses into wins, and he does that a lot. And the reason why he does that is because we've seen the difference maker that he can be on the base pass, setting the stolen base record at age 22 for the Washington Nationals when you have someone like Trey Turner, who had 46 stolen bases in one season. CJ Abrams said, that's cute. That is cute. But here's the thing with CJ Abrams, what we saw this year. He actually just hit simply more consistent. And while his batting average was down from 258 with the Nationals last year, he got on base at a much higher rate. He was slugging at a much higher rate. And all those things indicate is a higher OPS, which is what I get up for. And when I talk about OPS, it's kind of one of those things where you can take each number and kind of dissect it for themselves. Like his on-base percentage was still not that great. Getting on base at a 30% clip, 300 on the nose, while that's not terrible for a 22-year-old. But even then, as CJ Abrams gets on base, if he gets on base at a rate that is way more consistent than that, then you will see a much better version of CJ Abrams. Because over the course from July all the way through the end of the season, CJ Abrams was the Nationals' better hitter, in my opinion. You could talk about Lane Thomas, but even then, he struggled. Dominic Smith had some ups. He kind of struggled overall as well. CJ Abrams was that guy for the Nationals. He was the offense. He was the oil to our engine. If you don't have that oil, the engine ain't working. And this Nationals offense was powered by CJ Abrams. You can kind of see it within the numbers itself. He had 38 stolen bases from July 1st all the way through October 1st. And in that time period, that is when he got put up in the leadoff spot. And you had Lane Thomas batting second there. And that's what kind of made that perfect match. And that's when we saw a lot more wins and a lot more offensive production from this team. But from July 1st, because the season with Abrams, it started off a little slow. He hit that grand slam early on in the season up at Minnesota, and we were all kind of like, this is what we're talking about right here. This guy's got a little more power than what we think. And it was a clutch grand slam, by the way, too. It wasn't just some slap, you-know-what, to over right field wall. No, he killed that baseball. So going back to earlier portion of the season, I think a lot of it just has to do with reps. And I think the more that CJ Abrams gets over at shortstop, the more reps that he gets, I think that's probably going to be when we see the best version of himself. Because over that course of July all the way through October, really the second half of the season, in those 78 games that he appeared in, he batted .257, a .318 OBP, and a .434 slug that was a .752 OPS. Now, those numbers aren't world-beating by any metric. Those aren't just some amazing numbers out there. But when you consider that he's 22 years old, and you also consider the fact that this guy never played over a full season down in the minor leagues. 2019 was a half year. 2020, missed year. 2021, he got hurt, broke his ankle. There's a lot of different things to consider here with CJ Abrams and steps that he has taken since joining the Washington Nationals last year. And the steps are at the plate. Getting on base. Getting nice contact. Because you can also see the deep dive analytics in which they are also better than what we saw from last year. His exit velocity up just about a mile per hour from 2022. His launch angle up 6.7 degrees. His barrel percentage almost tripled from what he had from last year. His hard hit percentage up about 5 percentages as well. His sweet spot percentage up 4% as well. Number one, CJ Abrams was barreling up the baseball. And I think we saw that with his hard contact over the second half of the season. Now, what has changed with him? Because we always kind of knew that CJ Abrams isn't going to be this power bat. And he still isn't, by the way. But when you have 17, 18 home runs in a season at 22 years old, and also you steal 47 bags, there are things to consider with this. Number one, I'm starting to think that CJ Abrams has a little bit more power than what we think. And as we know, just simple biology, CJ Abrams is going to continue to grow. And in fact, we'll probably get into that a little bit in the offseason here. I want to see him grow. I want to see him get a little bigger because the fact is, CJ Abrams, he has the power threat in there. And once you get over on second base or first base, whatever it is, You want to have that threat of CJ Abrams, who can not only kill you with his power, but can also kind of do it with his legs. Because as we saw over the course of the second half of the season, there was probably no better base runner in baseball than CJ Abrams, just because of the simple fact you steal 38 bags over the course of a 2-3 month period. Oh my God. In today's rules, with what really there is, CJ Abrams, it's not that far-fetched to say this guy's going to steal 60, 70 bases in one season next year. That's not really that far-fetched. And really, when we saw the improvement over the second half of the season, I think this kind of goes back to what we were saying with the lack of reps, the lack of opportunities for Abrams. This is still now a 23-year-old, but over the course of the season, he was a 22-year-old still maturing, still growing, still learning what it takes to be an everyday player. And over the course of September, we kind of saw his production dip off and level off just a little bit. But even then, his numbers were still good. He still had the numbers to say, I can count on this guy going into the offseason. And I think if there ever was a question about who is kind of the face of the Washington Nationals, at this moment, I got to go with CJ Abrams. That's really what I believe in. And the reason why I say that is because he's kind of your kind of guys. He's 2023's baseball player. Simple as that. I stuttered over myself there, but even then, CJ Abrams is the guy that baseball players and all these baseball nerds like myself, analytic guys like myself, look at and say, this is the guy who has the highest ceiling amongst the everyday Nationals players at this second. James Wood, Dylan Cruz, Brady House, all those prospects down in the farm, they're not included in this conversation. But right now, as far as the guys on the active roster, as far as the guys that we saw up in the big leagues in 2023, CJ Abrams, by far and away, in my opinion, has the highest ceiling. And I think this is going to be someone that we can account for going forward. And not only just account for, this is going to be someone that I think we could be seeing a lot more from down the line. Because also, not even to mention, his strikeout rate was very good for a 22-year-old. And what I mean is he was in the 67th percentile in 2023 as far as his strikeout percentage goes. His whiff percentage, 67th percentile. We can also talk about other things that may not be there, like his expected batting average in the 41st percentile, his expected slugging in the 34th percentile, his hard hit percentage in the 20th percentile. But even then, you saw all those percentages and analytics grow over this season. And I think we're going to continue to see that as he just kind of matures and softens up his approach, because we did see one thing for sure. He does like to swing at pitches outside the zone at times. And that's fine. But even then, CJ Abrams, overall this season, improved dramatically. Dramatically. And even then, 81st percentile speed as well, covering a lot over at shortstop. And while baseball savant, they may not really see that, I think there's a lot of room to grow even for CJ Abrams as the fielder. Because his arm strength is in the 48th percentile. It's nothing special, but it's nothing bad either. He's right around average. And for someone who's going to be playing an everyday shortstop, for this team right now, need him to play an everyday shortstop going forward, I think all the numbers kind of back up what we saw with CJ Abrams. And the fact is, he's pretty damn good. Thank you guys for making Locked On Nationals your first listen every single day. And next, let's get into some 2024 expectations for Abrams. But before we do that, let me tell you guys about our friends over at Gametime. And guys, you should never have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event, because Gametime is the people that you want to deal with. And Gametime is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and their best price guaranteed. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And for a lot of you living in Washington, D.C. or the surrounding areas, you may decide to go to a Nats game or a Wizards game last minute, and you just want to buy tickets on your way there. That is why I tell you guys about Gametime, because that is what I do. I just simply go on their app, a few clicks away, and then bam, a few minutes later, I have my tickets on my phone ready to walk in and catch some sports. And you can do that for any other event as well, like concerts, comedy events, and much, much more. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime and download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDENMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Now we get back into it as CJ Abrams. We just broke down his 2023 season, what we saw, really what he improved on, and kind of the deep dive analytics. Now let's get into some projections for him going forward. I've always believed in the fact that CJ Abrams has the highest ceiling. I've always kind of thought in the back of my head, he could be kind of like that Trey Turner type where you don't really project him to have much power. And not a lot of people projected him to have much power. In fact, a lot of people would have thought that he would have never hit 18 home runs in a single season in his career. Well, at the age of 22 years old, CJ Abrams went yard 18 times, and 11 of those came from all the way through July, all the way through the end of September. CJ Abrams, I think CJ is the all-star of this team. I think this is going to be the guy who could be the perennial all-star, maybe an all-star starter, even at shortstop someday. That is the kind of potential that CJ Abrams has for this team. And I truly do believe in that fact as we sit here today. Because number one, we kind of alluded to this earlier, but today's game is about power and speed. And if you can have both those things in one thing, then you have something special. And I truly do believe in the fact that the Nationals, they have something special with CJ Abrams. Because you can talk about these different things and different things with players and kind of what separates them. Well, when you talk about CJ Abrams, I think one thing separates him from a lot of different people. Number one, the stolen base threat and really just what he did over the course of the season, only getting caught stealing 4 times over 51 attempts. That's special right then and there. Because not many guys can throw him out. And as we know, we didn't really see that. So number one, that's right then and there. That separates him from the pack as well. And at 22 years old, hitting 18 home runs, knocking in 64 guys, and really only striking out 118 times over 151 games in 563 at-bats. That right there is also kind of a special tack because when you're 22 years old, check out all the strikeout numbers in the past. Just look at them. Juan Soto, it was a little high as well. Not at 22 years old, you get what I'm saying. When you are this young and this advanced so far in a lot of different things where people look at, I think that just kind of bodes well for what you could be down the line. And CJ Abrams was always kind of this prized prospect. And I've always kind of believed in the fact that if CJ Abrams was with the Nationals, if he was drafted and developed by the Nationals, number one, he may not even be the same player that he is today. But that's beyond the point. I think CJ Abrams probably would have debuted sometime this season. The fact that he was in the majors last year was, number one, way too premature for the kid. And while he was impressive at his time down in the minors, it was still just way too early, in my opinion. He wasn't ready. And as we kind of saw last year, he was developing through his way in the major leagues and really on the way through this year too. Because he started off the season not that great. In fact, not good at all. But as we kind of saw, as he got his confidence back, as he was able to get on base a little bit more, as he got on base, he was able to steal a little bit more bags. As he got on base and he got to steal more bags, that gave him a little bit more confidence. And David Martinez kept on believing in him. And really the fans as well believed in him. Because this guy has the talent to be something special. So going ahead in 2024, to say that CJ Abrams couldn't hit 20-plus home runs at this point in his career, I think that's crazy. Because I think CJ Abrams not only is going to be a 2020 guy, but maybe even down the road, he could eclipse at like a 25 home run rate per season. That is the kind of power that I think CJ does have. And also, not even to mention, 28 doubles this year, that easily could turn into 30. Here's the thing that CJ Abrams is going to have to really work on to take those next steps and kind of what his numbers could look like down the line. CJ is going to have to work on his approach. Simple as that. Finding his pitch. Because what we saw from CJ Abrams this year, it showed just kind of a lack of experience overall. And that is, again, something that we've talked about and we've hampered over for years and years and years. Because from 2019 all the way through 2022, he only played in 114 minor league games. He's still young. He is still fresh, in fact. But CJ, what kind of sticks out with him the most, in my opinion, is the fact that he's just been learning on the fly in the major leagues. And that's not easy. A lot of these guys in the past who you may get called up early, Carter Kieboom, for instance, or think of that big name prospect, Lucas Giolito in the past as well, Ronaldo Lopez. A lot of these guys who get called up a little bit early, a little bit prematurely for a team that needs to compete right then and there, you see those guys kind of crumble. Because number one, you got the pressure. You don't really have time to develop. They want to see you hit the ground running, kind of like the way that Juan Soto did back in 2018, the way that Victor Robles did back in 2019. There really isn't much time to develop nowadays. And so going into 2024, I think this is when we could kind of see the next finished product with CJ Abrams. And the next finished product, what could that be? I think this is going to be someone who could hit 270 and who could have the numbers of a really quality shortstop, someone who's going to be solid defensively, someone who's going to cover a lot of range, someone who's going to hit 25 home runs, steal 50-plus bags, get on base at a hopefully 34% clip, have his slugging up to about a 450. Because I truly do believe that I think CJ Abrams could be an 800 OPS kind of guy, even above that, to be honest with you. Because number one, I expect more extra base hits. Simple as that. Because he had 29 extra base hits from July all the way through the last game, 162. 29 for his age over the course of 3 months. CJ Abrams has that kind of ceiling. He's that kind of talent who can kind of lift your offense and take it to a whole nother level. And as we saw in that July period and even August as well, when CJ Abrams was getting on base, you know he was going over to second base or third base or whatever it was. That's the kind of threat that he brings. So if you were to add that speed, which we already know is there, we already know he's going to be a base stealing threat. But if you were to add with just a little bit more power, and that may take away from your speed just a little bit. But even then, if you add a little bit more power in the bat, if you can find your swing, if you can really differentiate your approach from what it was this year, then I think that is when you will see the best version of CJ Abrams. And I think that is when you'll see an all-star shortstop when it comes to CJ Abrams. Because they call him the alien for no reason. Kid's an alien. He kind of has the it factor of what you want. And he's kind of the building block that this franchise really kind of needs to build around at this moment. Because we all know the outfield prospects down in the bigs, down in the minors rather. But CJ Abrams, don't forget that this guy was a top 10 prospect. And if he does develop the power that a lot of people didn't think he would have this season, and really even have more power, hit 20, 25 bolts a season, the kid's going to be so special, it probably won't even be funny. Because Trey Turner, this was kind of the same similar reaction to a lot of people had. We all kind of knew that Trey Turner had the power in his tool bag, whatever you want to call it, but not at that moment in time when you're hitting 28 home runs a season. I don't know if CJ Abrams can do that, but just by watching him and seeing what he did as a 22-year-old, there are some certain reasons as to why you could say you expect 20 to 25 home runs from this kid. And I don't think it's that far-fetched either, especially when you're going to be stealing 50-plus bases over the course of the season. Thank you guys for making Locked On Nats your first listen every single day. And next, I got one big question for CJ Abrams, but it's not really for CJ. It's about this Nationals organization. Let me tell you guys about that after this. Now let's get back into it, as there's a big question for CJ Abrams over the course of this offseason. This is kind of something that I kicked around last year as well. I like CJ Abrams. I like him a lot. I like him enough at this moment in time. Looking around, I'm willing to bank on this guy, CJ. I am willing to bank right here, right now. This is your franchise shortstop. This is the guy that you really kind of want to take you over that finish line, get you back in the playoffs, and hopefully have him for that run in the postseason. I am willing to bet right here, right now, that that is going to be the guy. You don't have to worry about anything else. You have your shortstop position filled. Well, you kind of know what other teams do when they have that filled and when you're not a Scott Boras client. It's time to talk contract extension for CJ Abrams. And I've also made this point last offseason, and I liked what I saw from him. In just a small little sample size, I liked what I saw. I could see the skill set, and I could see why the Nationals thought so highly of him. So over this season, you saw the same thing, and in my opinion, you saw even a little bit more, because I never expected CJ to be a home run guy. I never expected CJ to get over 10 home runs, if I'm even being honest there. That just wasn't what I was expecting with him. But now I'm willing to say this. CJ Abrams is the franchise guy. As of right now, if you walk over to Nationals Park entering 2024, his name, his photo will be on the forefront of everything that you see. Your game day magazine, CJ Abrams' face will be there. You're walking over to Half Street and those big poster boards on the parking garages, CJ Abrams will be there. Your first bobblehead night, CJ Abrams will be just that and more. This is the guy that you really need to extend, in my opinion, this second. Because number one, here's this. This is not a Scott Boras guy. This is not a Scott Boras guy. And Nationals fans, you know what I'm talking about right now. Because we do have some Scott Boras guys, including Mackenzie Gore. We got those. We got plenty of them. Dylan Cruz as well, down in the minors. We know they're going to be hard to extend. They're going to be hard ones to really get to sign an extension before they hit free agency. But you have someone with CJ Abrams who showed a lot of improvement, but even then, is CJ Abrams willing to take the risk that he doesn't improve, that he doesn't take these next steps that a lot of people think that he can make at this moment? Because that's really what it comes down to, and that's why people do sign extensions. That's why Keibert Ruiz signed his extension before the season started. Was because of the fact that, does he want to gamble with his career with the money that could be here right now? Because when we talk about extension, there's a lot of different things to consider. Number one, is your organization comfortable giving out that extension? Well, if you were to ask the Lerner family, they may have different answers than what Mike Rizzo has. But I'm willing to bet that Mike Rizzo would probably be kicking the tires on this one. And at this moment, it's not even that expensive, in my opinion. Because I think the Nationals, what an extension would look like for CJ Abrams, if they were to really go in on this, 8 years, $120 million, which is in 15 AAV. Now, that's pretty good money for CJ Abrams. But considering what else the rest of Major League Baseball is getting paid at shortstop, if you were to lock up CJ Abrams for the next 8 years, 8+ years, and get him extended already, number one, you look at that deal in 4 years from now, and you're like, oh my God, what a steal. Look at every deal that has been done like that before. And of course, there have been some that have flopped on franchises' faces. But if you look back at Ronald Acuna and the extension that he signed after his rookie season, you're like, oh my God, that's a steal. And if you look at that steal, like right now, the MVP of the 2023 season, Ronald Acuna, it is insane what he is getting paid. Ozzie Albies, his running mate, also a crazy good extension for him. You look at all up and down the Braves. They have done this. And some of that is just simply as that. I want what the Braves have. Yes, I want that. I want to have that organization that kind of thinks ahead and says, if we sign this guy now, what is it going to look like a few years down the line? Because not only are you getting them at a really good deal, but if they continue to develop the way that you think they are, then it's going to get more expensive. And it's as simple as that. And if they don't kind of sign those extensions early on, then it kind of handcuffs you for what you can do later on. Because number one, if a player is a sure thing, very good player, and maybe he wants to test the open market, then guess what? They're going to go to free agency. And with this team and the way that we spend, which has not been all that much over the last few years, are you going to take the risk that you could gamble and lose a free agent? And this is way down the road for CJ Abrams, but this is how teams have to think. You have to really project what he could be. And if you're comfortable enough with the way that you develop guys, if you are comfortable with the way that you spend your money, then I think extending CJ Abrams would be a no-brainer for this Nationals team. And while there are some gray areas with this, number one, what does the ownership want to do? Are they seriously considering selling the team still? Are they going to sell the team? Or are they all the way back in? That's a big question hanging in this offseason. And Rock Nation Sports, who represent CJ Abrams, they're going to ask the same thing. Because CJ Abrams, you're probably not going to want to sign an extension for a team that doesn't really know the future of their ownership. And I'm sure they probably know a little bit more than us fans know. It's still a big question heading into this offseason. But as I sit here, right now, you got to extend CJ and what he does for this organization. It's just something that has to be done, in my opinion, to really further solidify this rebuild and kind of show the fans as well. If the Lerner family, if you're going to keep the team, show us that you're all the way back in. Show us. Because this would be a big signing, in my opinion. This is something that just kind of gets the ball rolling into a solid 2024 season, and maybe you sign some help for starting pitching or whatever else holes that we need to fill on this roster. But CJ Abrams, for this season, the 2023 Nationals, was one of the brightest, if not the brightest spot of this team. And having him develop and kind of show the different tools that he has was one of the biggest developments of the Nationals 2023 season. Thank you guys for making Locked On Nationals your first listen. As we continue on this week, player breakdowns will be coming. So tomorrow, let's start off again with Mackenzie Gore and what to expect with him this offseason and beyond. A hint, he's pretty damn good as well. I'll catch you guys on the flip side.